Hello and welcome to an episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Neil Horwitz. You can find me on Twitter and J287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. The website is dsmsports.net, and the podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. You can also check out the podcast on TikTok, maybe on Instagram soon as well, where we do some clips, as well as on YouTube, where you can find the podcast, as well as some clips there also. But let's get into it. We got a great episode for you guys today. As soon as I met this guy, I've known him for a little while now. Just we're so excited to have him on the podcast. Very charismatic, very insightful, lots of good knowledge to drop. My guest on the podcast is going to be Dave Benson. He is the founder and CEO of Super Quick Question. Has a really cool, unique background, as you'll hear, in sports, out of sports, and now is running Super Quick Question, a product that's very relevant in the sports space. Works with a lot of sports properties and the brand partners of sports properties. Really helping to streamline meet and greets, getting athletes to really do meet and greets in a much more streamlined way, creating great memories for fans, capturing data along the way. So listen up, because here is Dave Benson of Super Quick Question. I am back on the podcast with today's guest. I'm so excited to be speaking with him. I knew from the first time we spoke that Dave would be an incredible guest. My guest on the podcast today is Dave Benson. He is the founder and CEO of Super Quick Question. And welcome to the podcast today, Dave.
Thank you for having me, buddy. Good to see you.
Well, I cannot promise that this will be only super quick questions. There will be some of those. But I'm excited to really pick your brain, learn all about all the insights and lessons that you have from being in the space and working on the brand side, the media side, working with sports properties. There's so much knowledge you have to share with us, so we're going to get all of it. But before we get in the media of our discussion, Dave, tell us about you. You have a really awesome career path. Tell us about your stops along the way, and then certainly how Super Quick Question came to be.
Thank you, bud. I really appreciate that. Yeah, my career is kind of a funny one. I was in sports media for a long time, ESPN and Bleacher Report, where I had a great time for both of them. I had a funny pivot where I went to work for IBM and became a tech guy for a little while, marketing. And then when I was there, I realized that everybody there was very smart and also liked really long meetings. And I'm an East Coast guy, and I'm impatient, and I talk faster than I should and all that stuff. I'm slowing down for you because it's a podcast. I don't want to go, at 1 3/4 speed or whatever the setting is. But yeah, everybody loved the long meetings, and people would always come up to me and say, "Hey, I've got a super quick question. Can we do a half an hour on Wednesday?" And I would say, "No, of course not. That's not a super quick question. Like, I've got other things to do." And I used to wear this big blue surf watch, and I would just say, "Hey, let's do it right now." And I bet it'll take us a minute. And people really rose to the challenge because nobody wants their time wasted, and it's the one thing you can't replace. So it was just like people would do the math in their heads really quickly and say, "Oh, wait, I can get 29 minutes back if we do this. Great."
Yeah.
So you don't need to ask me about my kids. We don't need to talk about the weather. We don't need to discuss office gossip or anything like that. It's like, ask me the thing you want me to ask. You want to know, and I'll give you the answer. We'll get to it, I promise. And way more often than not, you could bang it out in 60 seconds. So that started becoming a thing that I did. And then some of my colleagues did the same, and people knew that they could count on me to get stuff done quickly without robbing them of their time. So I teamed up with some developers and turned it into a thing. And then before I knew it, I had a conversation with a cousin of mine, my favorite cousin, and she said, "If you decide to do this, I'm going to invest in it." And I did, and she did, and then a few other people did, and then suddenly I'd raised some money and I quit my job, and that's where we are now.
I definitely want to dive into the background a little bit too, of your time in sports, so we can even get an idea of where you're coming from. But I really I love talking to folks in the startup space because it's so admirable and cool to take an idea and turn it into something. Like, what was that light bulb moment of this is not just like a Dave best practice that, like, hey, every CEO, every leader should just have a stopwatch in the room and say, if you really have a super question, then it's gonna be under a minute or under 2 minutes. Like, how do you know the difference between like a practice and an idea versus this is a product that we can actually build something that's productized?
Yeah, you don't. I think that's a great question. You don't know. And I think that's why startup life is so difficult, right? Because just because it sounds good and seems good and your friends tell you it's good doesn't mean it's good. Because at the end of the day, the truth will always come out, right? So it's like, if nobody's buying it, then it's not good. So I just think there's no real way of knowing until it hits the market. So that's one of the things that makes it really stressful to start your own thing, right? Because everybody will tell you, "Oh my gosh, there should be a cupcake store there." Of course you should open up a cupcake
Yeah.
store. But then if nobody wants cupcakes, you're out of business.
Yeah, and there's always this dichotomy of, and I may overuse this analogy at times of like the are you a painkiller, or are you a vitamin? Are you like giving us something that's going to really like help us with a problem that we faced and are stressed about, or something that may make us better? We're not even sure. Maybe it's like dog vitamins. We're not even sure if it's working or not. But and so that's a really
Yeah,
nice like, a way to think about it as well, I think. And yours, I feel like does a little bit of both.
I think you're right, and I appreciate you saying that. But it is, Mark Cuban always says that thing like you're solving a problem that nobody has, right? It's a solution for a problem that nobody
Yeah.
wants, right? So originally we were a business efficiency tool. That was the first year and a half. We were trying to get into businesses so that they could communicate better and more efficiently and not waste their time with long meetings, which is something we're still going to do. But we found progress really early with sports
Yeah.
and meet and greets and athletes. So that's something that people don't necessarily recognize as a problem, but it is something that we improved, right? Because it's like everything's changed over the past 10 years, 10 months, 10 days, right? The world is changing in such a fast way. But if you think about the meet and greet, it's the same exact experience that my dad had, right? And we've talked about
Yeah.
it, right? You wait in line to meet whoever, and then you get an autograph or a picture or a quick anecdote or a quick exchange, and then it's on to the next one. And, Fanatics Fest is a perfect example of that, right? That's the meet and greet, and people are still doing it. They still love it. But there've got to be other ways to do it using what we've got at our hands now, which is technology. Like you and I are talking right now, we're on two different sides of the country. We didn't invent that technology, but
Yeah.
why can't it be used for something like that? And then there's also got to be a way to make it efficient and fast and fun and safe. So we did all those things, and kind of created a different category. So to your point about is it a vitamin or is it medicine? It's, for us at least, it's a bit of both, because we address this problem that many teams and leagues and brands didn't know they had, which was how do we scale the appearances that we have from brand ambassadors? How do we achieve the contractually obligated appearances that we have from our athletes? But those are things that people just said, well, it's broken, but we're used to it broken the way that it is. And then we came in, and now suddenly teams and brands are able to get appearances from athletes when they're on vacation or when they're on the team bus or when they're injured in the training room. We actually did a thing like that with a football player. He was getting his ankle worked on and doing his meet and greet. It was perfect. So he talked to 30 season ticket holders while he was getting his ankle worked on.
Yeah, and I'm having like some PTSD flashbacks now of being in the locker room and going up to players and being like, "Hey, can I grab you? It'll only be 2 minutes, I promise." And
Yeah,
like then it turns into 5 minutes, of course. But so like
sure.
there's certainly that factor of like when the athlete knows there's literally a clock that's gonna hit zero. I mean that's something that's hard to measure, that like the willingness to participate more and the less stress that's on them and the less friction as well. So I can definitely appreciate that, both as someone who is bad at ending conversations and someone who has been in those shoes of like trying to convince an athlete that when I say 1 minute, it really means 1 minute, even though oftentimes it didn't.
Yeah, but Neil, you nailed it. Like you see the faces of these athletes when their handler or their press person or their agent or whoever says, "Can I just grab you for a minute to talk to this person?" They know it's not going to take a minute. And that's why that handler is often the one who says, "I'm sorry, I've got to pull him away now," right? Or "I'm sorry, she's
Yeah.
got to talk to somebody else now." And that's a thing that we've automated, right? And anytime you've seen the meet and greets where people are waiting in line, there's always somebody waiting there who's, like the bouncer / conversation ender who says, "Okay, Neil, we've got to go on to the next one."
Yeah, they play the bad
We've,
cop.
yeah. And we've made it so there is no bad cop. A minute is a minute. So the clock is the clock. And it's like you said a minute, we said a minute, we've agreed upon a minute. And when a minute elapses, now we're done.
Yeah, and I want to get into the mechanics of your question in a moment, but first of all,
Sure.
you have a really sexy background. I want to like hear about like what kind of you have this great knowledge base beyond just now being a CEO and building a product. So tell us like what kind of roles did you have at Bleacher, at ESPN, and what kind of gave you this knowledge foundation, both in how fans engage as well as just how the sports business works.
The most important part of my background that is still applicable to what I do today is that I was a bartender for a long time. And being a bartender is about so many things. Yes, you have to know how to make drinks, but it's also about being quick and being personal and being efficient and delivering on what you promise, right? You can't say, "I'll get you a drink in a minute," and then forget. You can't say, "I'll get you a drink in a minute," and then it's 10 minutes. And you just learn things from working with other people and how things have to function like that. And that led me to be, work in management. And then when I was at Bleacher Report, I was running a video team. And that became a really instrumental thing in my career as well, because you have all these smart, young, creative people. Everybody's got their own way of working, and being able to kind of coordinate them in a way that works for everybody was a really formative thing for my career.
Yeah.
And the fact that I've always been able to work quickly, whether it's behind a bar or writing or managing or anything like that, has always been a really valuable asset for me. And that actually got me my job. There used to be a show on ESPN called Cold Pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the precursor to Around the Horn and all those shows.
First Take.
And they right, exactly. And they had just fired all of their writers. And one of my old bosses was there, and he said, "Hey, can you come be the head writer?" And I was like, "Okay, where are the other writers?" He's like, "Oh no, it's just you." So I was the head and only writer of Cold Pizza for a little while. And it was a thing that was uniquely designed for me, because I was able to turn things out pretty quickly and get them done. So that was a nice short career stop. And then I went back to journalism for a while, and I worked for CBS and for local CBS News radio station. I worked for the BBC in London for a while. But yeah, I think everywhere that I stopped, and I say this to young people now, find the smartest person you can, or find the smartest people you can, and just like pay attention to stuff that they do that works, and then adopt those practices as your own. And it's like plagiarism being the sincerest form of flattery. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do it how he did it because it was great, or I'm going to do that thing that she did because it works, and now I'm going to make that my thing.
Yeah. I guess like using that as a jumping off point, sort of. I always like to ask people, question people who come from BR, like what did Bleacher Report, like what was their secret sauce, that what do they know that others didn't know? Where were they ahead of the curve on that allowed them to grow? Because they were, it was a crowd space at one point. You had Fansided, SB Nation, and all these other like platforms that were trying to do something similar to what Bleacher Report was doing to some extent. And I can list more and more. Like what worked then, especially from your perch on the video side, that was ultimately super important to actually driving revenue as well.
They were just really smart and had smart leadership. The guys I worked for at Bleacher Report were really like among some of the more clever folks that I worked for in my career. And they knew that the world was constantly changing and the audience was constantly changing, and you couldn't just keep doing the same thing over and over. So if you look back at the history of Bleacher Report, it wasn't always copy and paste, especially with the video stuff. We would occasionally do a series, but it would never go on for too long. It was like, you've got to keep listening to what the audience wants, and you've got to keep meeting them there. And they were also really fast and really agile. So just people worked incredibly hard and incredibly late to get stuff done and make sure it was good. And it was never just like, this is okay, let's just put it out there so we have stuff on the site. Yeah. And that was also one of the benefits of Bleacher Report being first. The other ones that you mentioned kind of didn't grow as quickly as Bleacher Report. So Bleacher Report had the resources to kind of stay ahead of everybody.
Yeah. And they, of course, nailed the app game. They were really the forefront of having an app. Yeah. Probably maybe the first app in history. People were like, I actually like this app. And that
I still use Bleacher Report. I still use the Bleacher Report app all the time.
Hell yeah. And you of course have witnessed this evolution of what drives sports interest and sports fandom. And I want to talk about a little bit like how you saw the sort of from your perch, at least from your purview, you were obviously in and out of sports at times, of this rise of athletes actually like saying what they actually want to say, as opposed I'm saying that in a kind of a crude way, but when you and I were growing up, it was you got the milquetoast quotes from an athlete that through a beat writer or through a columnist at best, and then you had the rise of kind of of Twitter, and then Players Tribune came along a little bit, and even that's a little bit more like ghostwriting type stuff. Then like you had this way where athletes started to build more authentic relationships with fans. Fans felt like they know them, and that's that ultimately we'll get more into it when talking about SQQ in a moment as well. But like, how did you witness that rise of athletes being at the forefront and being less about the gatekeepers, I guess?
Yeah, I love that question. So some leagues are better than others, and some athletes are better than others. But the NBA was at the forefront of that for sure, where they kind of let the athletes be who they were, and people loved it. And then you look at some of the other leagues that stayed behind and kept their athletes behind gates, and you could only say stuff through the media departments and things that were approved. But these guys are these folks are all people, and they have their own personalities. And like you look at for example, you look at the WNBA and how the All-Star weekend just absolutely crushed as far as ratings go. It's not because of the game. It's not because of the events of the All-Star weekend alone. It's because people care about the stories. And that's like a tale as old as time itself is like people like stories. And it's like you think of an athlete's life story, you think of an anecdote, you think of the Ricky Henderson anecdotes and Caitlin Clark and all these things. It's like these are stories that we care about and they keep our interest. So it's never going to be just about statistics.
Yeah.
So I think the leagues that are really excelling now are the ones that are allowing the athletes to be themselves and exploiting their personalities. Like you look at Drive to Survive, right? What a huge success that was. Whereas everybody's just like, oh, here's this bunch of, handsome international dudes behind helmets. And then you see them in their ads and stuff, but you don't really know anything about them. Now you know their personalities and people actually care. They're like, what do you mean Lewis Hamilton left and now he's at Ferrari? And it's like, people actually care about this stuff who aren't big race fans because of the personalities. And you feel like the more you feel like you know these athletes, the more you care.
Yeah. And it's cliche to talk about like, in a good way, I guess, but to talk about we are in the memory making business, and that's what sports is. And early on, it was you got the autograph, and that was proof that you met this athlete. You were face to face with them. They signed your baseball, they signed your shirt, whatever it might be. And then it evolved to like the selfie became the new autograph, and that still is something these days. But I think beyond that now, it's more about me getting that selfie, but also the athlete said they liked my shirt, or I remember this exchange and having that more visceral memory and a story that's unique to you. And I think that maybe that gets in a little bit of what Super Quick Question can deliver as well, where it's not just we all have the same autograph, we all have the same selfie, but no, I have something that's unique to me that I can tell stories for the rest of my life, and that's truly
yeah. I was at spring training years ago. I was working for a TV station called New York One, and I was covering spring training for the Mets. And I was standing behind a couple of guys were playing pepper, and I was right by Edgardo Alfonso, who was a Mets favorite. And a ball hopped over his head, and I happened to be on the phone, and it hopped over his head, and I caught it. And then I flipped it to him, and he goes, "Nice hands." And I was on the phone with my friend, and I just go, "Fonzie just told me nice hands." And then I called all my other friends, and I was like, "Hey, Fonzie told me nice hands." So it's like that's my thing forever, is that a guy that I adulated on the Mets was like, "Hey, nice catch." So like that's a memory for me forever, And I think those of us, the sports fans who are not lucky enough to work in the sports industry, those instances are few and far between, and they often have to be synthesized or paid for or both. So like you pay to meet a retired athlete, and then they'll say, "Hey, I like your shirt." Right? Or then you look at the Cameo, the rise and fall of Cameo was you would pay somebody to say, "Hey, I like your shirt," right? Or more accurately, you'd pay them to say happy birthday.
Right.
But so the organic occurrences of these things are so awesome. And that's again what the WNBA gets exactly right is you see these athletes, they go into the crowd, like they shake hands and they talk to these young fans and they make fans for life. And it's like, it's not just the sentimentality of it. It's actually really, really good business.
Yeah.
Because if you are, Serena Ionescu, right, and you go into the crowd and you talk to somebody, you high five some young fan and you say, "Oh, are you a basketball player too? And you should keep your elbow in when you shoot," or whatever it is. That fan is going to be a Liberty fan for life, right? And like that's it. And then they buy stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, sports is a business, right? And we all know that it's about advertising and it's about butts in the seats and all that stuff. But the thing that fans often, or the things that organizations often forget, is that you're nothing without your fans. And you can learn that really quickly, because if your fans decide they're not interested, then you're out of business.
Yeah.
And, so ways, and you see all these really innovative ideas and practices that teams are doing, whether it's different forms of fan engagement or fan rewards or access or things like that. And they're all trying these different things. And I really like the trend of trying to put the fans further at the forefront, right? It can't just be about the sponsors. And, I think that the trend of, and this is not remotely the question you asked, but I think the trend of gatekeeping sports broadcasts is terrible. And I think it looks like it's going to shift, where, you've got these local stations that should be providing baseball games for free, and they're saying, okay, you've got to pay us $80 a year or
Yeah.
$180 a year. And it's
You have
just
to
like,
pay to be you have to pay to be a fan. You're gatekeeping fandom.
yeah, right. It's like, just show me. And that was the thing when I worked at Major League Baseball for a little while too. And that was the thing that I couldn't understand was like, why aren't we just letting every single clip we have be on YouTube? So if I want to tell, and this was a real example, I was trying to tell my kids about a time that Don Mattingly went into the stands to catch a foul ball and he ate some kids' popcorn. And it was a great little thing, and I thought it was really funny, and it was endearing, and it was made, baseball beautiful and all that stuff. And I went to find it on YouTube, and I couldn't find it. It's like, how is that a win for anybody?
Yeah. No,
It's like, just let me show it.
It's a great call. As you were talking through like the Sabrina Ionescu anecdote, I kept thinking around like that the currency that athletes have is their time and the ability to make every second they spend making eye contact and giving a fan their time is so meaningful to a fan. That's a gift to them, and there's only so much that to go around,
Yeah.
which is why it's scarce, and why it's more meaningful than say like if Meta tried to produce a bot that can mimic Sabrina Ionescu's answers, like that was never gonna work because you don't want to talk to some facsimile of the athlete. You want the real
Yeah.
thing. You want to know that for at least 30 seconds or a minute, I was the focus of this athlete. Like that's fucking cool. And
Yeah.
that's like I got to meet my hero, and the hero knows who I am, made eye contact, and recognized me as a human being.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
I was a kid. I was like 10 years old or thereabouts, and I was with my dad. And we got into an elevator, and Lyle Alzado was in the elevator. So Lyle Alzado, you may remember him from the Raiders. You may not be able to, but he, Hall of Famer and all that stuff. And I was a Jets fan. I still am a Jets fan, which is one of the worst things to be. But I was in the elevator, and I knew who he was, and I was like, I said hi to him. And so from whatever time it took us to get from the ground floor to the 20th floor, probably less than a minute, he talked to me. And he introduced himself, and he said, "You look like a football player." He's like, "Maybe you'll be in the NFL one day." And it was just such an awesome thing for me. And then from then on, I followed, in addition to following the Jets, I followed Lyle Alzado. And despite the fact that he was wrong about my potential to be in the NFL, it was a unique experience for me.
That's awesome. I have a similar story of meeting Dave Winfield in the breakfast line at the hotel at spring training. The stories are the best
But
thing.
that's it. We all love those moments, right? And you have to be lucky enough to get into the breakfast line at the right time that Dave Winfield happens to be there. So, I think what the smart brand sponsors and the smart teams are doing is to try and make those moments actually attainable, like, so you can talk to these guys and you can meet them. And, even the things where most baseball teams do, the thing where you let little kids get to run the bases on certain days of the season, like just stuff like that to connect fans further to the team and the game. I just love stuff like that.
Yeah, I always like to think about like how do you not manufacture is the wrong term, but how do you produce deep engagement? So those are the things that will stick with you, that
Yeah.
actually moves them up the fan spectrum. You can see that moment that like that they go from being a casual to a diehard, or someone that's going to have that generational
Yeah.
lifelong fandom, and that's what it's all about, is creating those deep engagements in my mind. And that's been the way from when I first started in this business to to up to today, of course. It,
Yeah, well, look, you think about college sports. What has deeper engagement than college sports, right? Because like, I went to school with, like, I go to the same school as those athletes, right? So I love them, and I'm going to watch them, and then that relationship persists. And stuff like that is difficult to replicate outside of collegiate sports, right? So everybody's trying to do it and make these relationships that last, because it is customer acquisition at the end of the day, right? So you do want there to be a real relationship. You do want people to remember forever, like, this is my team and I'm not changing.
Yeah, I always think about how like you want to feel like you know them. There's a reason like I would never I don't care, I don't give a crap about watching whatever high school football, but if it's my high school and I know like, oh, that's my friend's brother or whatever, or I went to school with
Yeah.
that, like all of a sudden I'm really interested. And so it's like, how do you get that feeling to go to scale up to the major pros, where you may not live next door to them, but at least you feel like you know them because you know what songs they listen to, or you know what their favorite food is, or you
Yeah.
know what's on the background of their bedroom when they're answering questions or whatever. So I
Yeah.
just want to get into the mechanics because there's so much we can learn from you about how what you are able to take away from working with brands, working with sports teams and leagues, and so give us first. I guess we haven't really articulated it. What is, super quick question? How does it work?
Oh yeah.
What is the actual product? And what does an activation look like?
So one of our clients described it as Cameo meets FaceTime, which I kind of like. But Super Quick Question is a meet and greet platform. It's a live video one-on-one meet and greet that lasts for 1 minute. So athletes are able to talk to fans the way you and I are talking right now on video, privately one-on-one, and each interaction lasts for 1 minute. Hence the name Super Quick Question. So the fans submit their questions in advance. So it's, what do you eat on game day? What's your favorite restaurant in Indiana? I've got a young basketball player at home. How can she work on her jump shot or whatever it may be? And the athlete sees all those questions in advance. They're screened and all that great stuff. And then when it's your turn, you get to ask that question privately. So as we discussed before, it doesn't stream live. So it's not like an Instagram live. And it's not like a Reddit AMA. You mentioned, ghostwriters before. You're typing in your answer, and who knows who's answering on behalf of the athlete.
I've been one of those ghostwriters on a Twitter Q&A.
Yeah, it happens. But this is it's a nice way for folks to just actually get a conversation going. Some of the questions are serious, some of the questions are goofy, but it's always a genuine, the term fan engagement gets bandied about so much these days. Fan talking to an athlete is the most pure form of engagement, right? All the anecdotal stuff that you and I just talked about, that's what this is for. Right. So you can have a young athlete, a young fan, an old fan, whoever maybe gets to talk to their athlete and say, listen, my kid wants to be just like you. What should they do? Right. Or I was at that game where you scored the game winner and I was sitting with my dad. It was my favorite thing. Or to your point, it's like, what are you listening to right now? Like, what's your favorite song? It's like, great. That's going to be my favorite song from now on. Yeah. And we do, you mentioned before, but cheesy though it may be, it is creating memories. Because you get these awesome little conversations that you otherwise would have to get lucky enough to get on the breakfast line next to them.
Yeah. And you mentioned it's 1 minute long. And I was almost thinking in my head and the first 10 seconds or 15 seconds are oftentimes people going, is that really you? Oh my God, this is crazy. Yeah. And then they finally get to the actual answering question part.
Yeah, it is. It's usually the first 4 or 5 seconds are, oh my God, I can't believe I'm really talking to you. And those are my favorite. Our highlight reel, which I'll send you, is comprised of a lot of those moments of like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm really talking to you. And those things are so great because they're just these pure, joyful moments. And, it's not just the young fans. It's like adults too. Like we're all at heart, we're all fans and we all get excited.
Totally.
But yeah.
So how do these things, I guess, both who do you end up working with within these, is the brand usually the client? Because I mean, a lot of these things come down to Verizon is bringing you this meet and greet with this athlete. So is that a Verizon bringing their tool to a property saying we want to work with you, or just them working with the athlete directly? How does it work with interfacing with teams? Are you working more like digital folks or sponsorship folks? So what's the business case, and who's usually the I guess not necessarily the client to put in stark terms, but who's
the end user? Yeah. So it's a great question. So we in the early days of Super Quick Question, we were working almost exclusively with the teams. So I was going around and talking to all these different teams and saying hey, you should use this for your meet and greets. And that worked well. But then we signed a deal with Verizon, and that changed everything for us because Verizon has all these sponsored athletes, hundreds, athletes, influencers, musicians, artists, etc. And it is very difficult to coordinate. On a human level, there are people, very hardworking people at Verizon, who have to coordinate these appearances. So that's travel and food and security and hotels and all these other things. And not to mention a venue, so it becomes very cumbersome and expensive.
Yeah, it's an assembly line, or it's just shake and move on, shake and move on, whatever.
Yeah, and also very often these appearances don't ever get achieved. So you'll have an athlete that has 5 appearances in their contract. They'll get maybe 2 or 3 over the course of the year. And that was an eye-opening statistic for me, is that 60% of these appearances end up never happening.
Wow.
Which is a crazy thing. So the amount of waste and spillage, right, from these contracts is huge. And it's true across every client I've spoken to, right? Pepsi said the same thing. All of our big clients say the same thing. They're like, yeah, we never get all of our appearances. So now what Verizon's able to do is they say, okay, so we had a retired Manchester City player who owed Verizon 1 appearance. His agent said he's already on vacation. He's in the Caribbean. They're like, great. He's going to do a Super Quick Question from the Caribbean. And it was perfect because he was on the beach and he said he knows he owes them an appearance and he wants to make them happy because he wants to get a contract the next year to renew his deal.
Yeah.
So he goes, yeah, he's on the beach and he says to his family, I'll be back in 45 minutes. He goes into the room, talks to 30 Verizon VIP customers, and then he's back on the beach. And then he can check off one of the appearances that he owes. So, it's just one of those, we've been finding a lot of the win-win scenarios throughout our business.
That's awesome. And is it typically working? Are the brands making up the majority of the client base now? And how are they? I mean, ultimately, is it around like if you because you have the athlete for a limited amount of time, by nature, of course, it's a scheduled appointment. So, like, what are like some of the main KPIs? How are they thinking about success? And I mean, you mentioned like VIP customers. Others are just wide open. I'm sure, like anyone who can submit, and then we select some. So, like, it's a data capture vehicle. It's a memory making vehicle. It's a deep engagement vehicle. So, what are some of those things that we say like this is worthwhile? This is getting you some return on your investment.
Yeah. So you kind of nailed it. Like, and it depends on one of the things that I do now is every time I talk to a client is I just ask them their KPIs, right? Like, let's just find out from the beginning what a successful thing looks like, and then we'll do it. So sometimes it's data capture, which we are actually really good at. We have a very high conversion rate for people filling out the forms. So if they'll do a sweepstakes and say, enter here for a chance to talk to Caitlin Clark, 10,000 people enter. Great. We've just captured 10,000 new data points for you. We've got AI filters that go through all the questions and make sure they're relevant and all those things, and then narrow it down. Other teams, like we've got a thing coming up, the Indianapolis Colts, that they're using one of their ambassadors, Edgerrin James, to reward season ticket members.
Yep.
So thanks for buying your suite for the 10th year in a row. You're going to get to talk to Edge, who, by the way, lives in, not Indiana anymore. I think he's in Miami. So he can do this thing without them flying him in. Yeah. We're also going to work on a thing with the Colts for their kids club. So you sign up to be in the kids club, and you get to talk to this player throughout the season. And then we've also got purchase incentives. So that's one of our big clients right now is one of the big sports betting companies. And they do a thing where it says bet now, and you get a chance to talk to this athlete. We've done a thing with a Formula One race team or rather an IndyCar race team that said, buy this now and you'll get a chance to talk to one of the drivers. So yeah, it depends on what their goals are, but either way, we're agile enough that we just kind of slot in there and put the pieces together of, okay, we've got an athlete, we've got a goal, and we've got a bunch of fans. So we just kind of marry it together.
Yeah, it makes me think too. Like I loved all those examples of being able to. It can be a kids club. It can be alumni engagement. It can be all these things. Sponsors even. You can have a team reward a sponsor. Like we're gonna go in the conference room and we're gonna have a player answer a bunch of questions that you guys submitted before this. And like there's really is, no end to that as well. I was dancing around this a little bit, but I'm really curious. Because you say like you have the brand side, you have the team side, and both are clients at times, both are direct clients at times. Like what's the general best practice, or what do you see prevailing most in the marketplace where let's say the Colts worked with Verizon or Pepsi or one of the brands that you named, like who brings that tool to the table, like, or who generally should, and both, and what are you seeing in the marketplace prevail? Like, who's the provider of these solutions, or is it ultimately just like they agree in activation, then someone says, oh, we already have this great solution in place, we should use this and make it easier, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's the last thing you said is actually exactly how it goes, because the Colts actually do have a relationship with Verizon, so it becomes much easier for us when we're already talking to the Colts and we're already talking to Verizon. We go, oh, you're already both familiar with this. You can just decide which one of you wants to use it off your account. So, it works out really nicely that way. And that's not yet the majority of our arrangements, but we're, hoping to get there. The more brands and the more teams we get contracts with, the more overlap there's going to be.
Yeah. I want to hear again briefly, just so I can visualize how it ends up working. Like, give me an idea of what the athlete experience is. Like, what are they looking at? Or how much do they know going in versus versus the questions are a complete surprise. You mentioned there's some screening process, and are they sitting in front of a laptop? Or like, what's the experience like?
Yeah, so that's something that we worked on a lot over the past year or so. Because we get feedback from the athletes. And now we're really pleased to say that the athletes are pretty close to 100% satisfied. Like when they're done, they always say, this was great, I would do it again. Because we made it as easy as possible. And that's the whole thing, like we talked about before. Everything's got to be easy. Everything's got to be obvious. Nobody wants to learn a new technology. Nobody wants to install a new thing. So everything is browser-based. The athlete, say it's Jerry Rice, who we just did one with the other day. Jerry Rice gets sent a link. or more accurately is going to be his press person or his assistant or whoever gets sent a link to an encrypted and unique super quick question URL. And when they click on it, it'll show a queue of fans and their questions. So it'll say Neil is first. He wants to talk about Joe Montana, right? And then it says Dave is second. And the question is, what do you eat on game day? And so on and so on and so on. So he's got 40 fans he's going to talk to. It's going to take him an hour. So those questions have all been screened for him through numerous screening processes. But he will then look at them and he can spend an hour going over them if he wants to prep. But more often than not, he's just going to look at them quickly so he knows what's coming up next.
Yeah.
And then when he's ready, there's only one button on the screen, which says Meet Guest. So he clicks that, and then the first one is in, and then they're live and one-on-one, same as you and me talking right now. So you imagine it like a FaceTime or a Zoom. The biggest difference being there's a timer bar that goes across the bottom, and it counts from 0 to 60. And when it gets close to the end, it'll say cheese, and then it takes a picture. So the fan is going to get that, and then a little jingle starts to play, and then a curtain comes up from the bottom to end the interaction politely but definitively. Yeah. And then for Jerry Rice, he's on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And then for the fan, they're now done and they get their picture and they're on their way.
Yeah. And do you find, like, especially on the team side, like how much is there, like, not necessarily a conflict, but around, like, is it usually easier to do it with alumni players or not because in some ways, like, the brand could work with the team and say, the team's gonna select a few players for you, or they're gonna put their preference in, and we want this our first choice, second choice, third choice, or they can go directly and work with the athlete and go to a CA or Wasp or their direct or their management team or whatever. Like, so are you seeing, like, how does that relationship dynamics tend to play out, especially when you're when you have a team or a property and partner conversation?
Yeah, it's usually pretty easy because it's more often than not they have a player in mind. So they don't have to usually comb through their relationships. They'll say, like, the Colts is a great example. Edgerrin James is one of their, more prominent alumni with whom they have an ongoing relationship. So they just plug it in with him, and then they can do anybody else they want. So it just depends on who they want to use for the specific case.
So it's just like having him do, like, a read on camera for 30 seconds. Instead, it's going to be, this is the activation. This is how we're going to use you. No, that definitely makes sense. You touched on too around how there is that memento, that picture being taken and all that. And I definitely want to hear, what the mechanisms are or mechanics are for amplifying these moments. Of course, a fan is going to want to tell everyone about it. Maybe they want to keep it private. Like, what's delivered to them? How do you make sure that you amplify these moments? And are the brands trying to track the value of that amplification? The teams as well, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, so we did one early on with Pepsi with a Brazilian pop star named Anitta, super duper famous and great. So she did one, and then they got the most engagement out of their single post that was promoting it before, that said, click here for a chance to meet Anitta. Their next most engagement was the one after that said, here's the highlight reel from our Anitta event. So they take the content, these wonderful moments that we create, and then they can use them on their social media. The teams can use them on the big screen in the stadium, whatever they want. But it's like, if you think about it, right, the content from these things, you see things like this on Bleacher Report and on, just generally on Instagram and things like that, of these lovely interactions between fans and players, whether it's, I gave him my shoes or my gloves or just had a nice moment where we had a chat. We've got all of those, right? And so if you do 40 fans meeting a player, chances are a few of those are going to be really, really nice. And then the team or the brand gets these lovely moments that they can then use for marketing content.
Yeah. I'm curious because I back during the height of the pandemic and Zoom relationships. Granted, we're on Zoom right now, so we're going strong there. But I got a cameo for my mom for her birthday. Or I think it was for her birthday. It might be something else. With Teemu Selanne, her favorite player on the Anaheim Ducks, and it was an awesome cameo. He did a great job and all that. But I keep thinking, like, okay, it's gonna be saved to her phone. She's gonna watch it maybe like 5 or 6 times. She's gonna show it to other people as well. And then how do you create these digital mementos? Like it's not we're like in the old days you'd have like I got a selfie at a spring training with Ricky Henderson back in the day, and it was a picture on the wall with me and my brother. And so there was
Yeah.
a physical, tangible object. Like, how do you? What are the ways that not just for super question, but I guess even just bigger picture at large? How do we memorialize these ultimately digital first, capture moments? Are people printing out the picture and then putting it on the wall, or is there even a way? Like, can they create like a picture frame with a QR code that pulls up, a video of the athlete talking to you? Like,
Yeah.
what are some ways we can really evolve this way to memorialize moments?
So one of the things I usually say when I talk about this is you know when you see people at a fireworks show and they're recording it,
Oh yeah.
and it's just like, for me, I'm always like, you're not going to watch that. Just live in the moment, like enjoy it. Like, who cares? So that's kind of our thing where it's like, it's more about the stuff that we talked about before, where it's like you have it internalized forever that you're always able to say, rather than, walking around with a picture of you and Ricky Henderson, you're always able to say, I met Ricky Henderson, So I think for us, it's more about the moments. And then look, of course, it is still a business and people want the metrics. So it's like you get this picture and then you will post it on your socials. Most of the fans are going to post it on their socials to say, I got a chance to talk to this athlete. But yeah, I think that for us, what we found is that the ephemeral, the ethereal nature of the whole thing, the fact that it is fleeting and temporary, makes it more special, right? The urgency of it all, that I've only got a minute and we're both going to be focused on each other, just makes it really a special moment that is for that particular moment.
But you don't imagine like 30 years down the line, like, someone be showing their kids or their grandkids, like, this, look at, I met Caitlin Clark back when she was, in her second year in the
Yeah.
NBA. Like, is that not like a practice that you want to be able to have them be able to pull it up easily, whether it's on their phone or, like I said, like, I think of this future of like, I'm going to be able to scan a QR code on this refrigerator magnet that just pulls up, this
Yeah.
that I had or something along those lines.
Yeah. That's the next startup.
Oh, I love it. That's how we go for sure. I want to also like touch on a little bit of where this can go in the future. Like what do you think that key insight is that SQQ does so well? I think we've talked a lot about them, and how does that I guess how does that play into the vision of like, is it just a matter of this can really scale a lot in college and this can help smaller athletes, Olympic athletes maybe make ends meet, especially when they're trying to raise more money. Is it about like getting outside of sports and certainly and going and at least unleashing it to like the Real Housewives of the world and all that as well? We've seen some even like quasi competitors in the space of getting involved in that world. It's like where do you see this going and how do you take in those lessons, what you have learned about execution, about fandom, to really guide that?
We're paying a lot of attention to what is working and what is not. And I think you're right. Like, outside of sports is definitely going to be a big part of our future. So the content creator economy and influencers, but essentially for us, our product is such that it provides access to the inaccessible. So that doesn't necessarily have to be athletes, and it is athletes across all sports, right? So NIL is next for us for sure. Motorsports have been big for us. We're getting into all of the sports that there are, and international outreach as well. But yeah, what's next is going to be entertainment, and then there are lots of other spaces where it's just like folks who have certain areas of expertise that other people want to capitalize on.
I just stressed myself out thinking about politics, and good Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're going to definitely stay away from that for now.
Oh, do you find that for the most part, is it better to be this is a sponsor based thing, and a brand is helping to bankroll this as opposed to a straight pay per play, and maybe that it's because even if pay per play, it's still not Cameo, because Cameo is not synchronous. That's why
Yeah.
it's different. So like, do you see
Well,
more
that's
or brand rolling?
yeah. Yeah. Well, you nailed it. Like, a big part of our problem prop is that you mentioned before too, is like, the fans don't pay for this. And that's a huge differentiator for us, right? You've already paid for your fandom. And like we were talking about with like local broadcasts, it's like, it's not nice to make people pay beyond their fandom, right? So it's like, yeah, I buy my tickets to my games and I buy my jerseys and my hats, etc. But other things that are just, opportunities to make fans pay more money, that's kind of not what we're trying to do. So yeah, keeping it free for the fans is really important to us. And all of our clients share the same position, which is really good. No clients have said, can we monetize this? Which is great, because they're all just like, they get that when they give stuff to fans, it just enhances the experience for everybody.
Are you fine? Is this how old or how new is this concept of how brands are activating with their ambassadors? Like ambassador rosters are not anything new. There's been different ways that they've
Yeah.
activated. They've had please put this post up or collab with us on a post or
Yeah.
on the social media side. So like is this has the brand ambassador relationship always kind of been there, and this is just a new way to act, a new and better way to activate it at scale, or is this trying to introduce like a new best practice that this is going to be the way it's going to be from now on because there's no better way to engage a customer base or a client base than this real life if you have ambassadors at play.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope what you said is a good prediction, and then this becomes the standard. But the things are evolving really quickly, right? So now you see folks, when you see an athlete posting something on their socials that say, I only drink this energy drink, it's like, it's not worth it anymore, because fans and audiences have gotten so much smarter, right? And we are like, we sense bullshit a mile away, right? So if you see an athlete saying, I drink this, it doesn't matter. And then it also damages their own NIL when they seem to be a shill for a company, right? If it's all branded posts. So their managers are telling them not to do it anymore. And same with Cameo, right? The smart managers were telling these athletes, don't get on Cameo, it diminishes your image. So ways in which brands can organically use their relationships are what they're looking for. So whether it is just like a regular meet and greet, or if it's, putting them in a commercial, and like, that's never going to go away. Wearing a logo on their sleeve or a branded thing, that's also totally great and fine. But for us, like, we're just kind of trying to add to the inventory of things that these brands can do that are going to be good for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a conversation that's getting even bigger now of how do we maximize what we can get out of these relationships. And you're seeing like I think the Nike World Cup ad was a great example. I read a deep dive on it a couple days ago where they were like, yeah, we knew we had them for this day for a certain number of hours for this photo shoot for this commercial, and yes, we're gonna create the actual hero commercial that's gonna air, but we also like we screwed around with them on the side to create some outtakes and bloopers and things that they want to do. And so it's like,
Yeah.
how do you make the most of that limited time you have with them and make the most of this relationship? And that this is one more way to do that. Of you have this ambassador, you can ask them to post something on social. You can ask them to do a scripted read on camera or whatever, an unboxing video. But you also have this option now that is a great way to drive incremental and exponential value in many ways as well.
We have a client that is in motorsports. And their idea, which we haven't done it yet, but their idea is that these F1 drivers are so in demand, and it's kind of a perfect spot for us because they're super famous. There's only 22 drivers, right? So it's like they're not making enough of them to spread to service the entire fan base, and they have a million brands that are all trying to get a piece of their time. So what one of the clients has proposed is that when this driver is picked up from his hotel to go to a photo shoot or a commercial shoot, they will have a tablet sitting in the back seat of the car, already open to super quick question for him. So he gets picked up at 3:00. At 3:05, he starts a super quick question. He does it for the 30 minutes that it takes him to get to the studio or the shoot or whatever. And then he's fulfilled that obligation and made a bunch of fans really happy.
That's awesome. Where else my mind goes is as we've seen the rise of this kind of like behind the scenes content of like, yes, we want to see a day in the life of the athlete, but we also want to see a day in the life of the team nutritionist or the person that's in charge of like unloading the equipment from the truck. Like, so there's something to that probably in the future as well. Like, do you have a super question for the team physical therapist or the landscape?
We just did one the other day with the chief data officer for an F1 team, and it's like he's not famous, but like the people who wanted to talk to him really wanted to talk to him. They wanted to know like about the data as far as it is related to the F1 strategy. And we're going to do stuff with like pit crews and all these things because like people care. And you just, so, finding the right audience that cares for them and then being able to connect them is a fun thing that we're going to be doing.
Love that. A couple more minutes left here with Dave Benson, founder and CEO. Super quick question. A couple more super quick questions for you before we get to the shareable stat, and then we'll have some more with you as well. You get to see all these encounters, all these engagements with athletes, and I think anyone that's worked in sports, even heck, any fan in general who's met an athlete, there are some athletes who are really easy, and not easy is the wrong term, but like they're extroverted. They're in their element when they're talking to others, and others are both because of language barriers sometimes, as well as just they're not trained to be on media. Maybe that's evolving now as well as in the NIL era and all the interviews they've done before they get to the pros. But like, what are you seeing around? Like, how do you make an athlete comfortable? How do you get someone who's maybe a little quieter to get more excited? And I'm sure too, part of it might just be the energy of the fans is contagious. Also, once they see how excited the fan is, that maybe gets them out of their shell a little bit too. So like, what have you learned about helping, I guess, for someone that's in the shoes of being that right hand man or being that social media person, to getting the athlete to be a little more comfortable in these situations?
Yeah. Well, look, Neil, if they could all be as loquacious as you, we would never have that challenge. We had a contract with the professional bull riders, and there was concern that these guys are not. They're very aw shucks, modest. Not in it for the interviews. That's not the thing they're into, right? That was the original concern. And these guys, every single one of them, was awesome. Because my theory is that because it's one-on-one, right? If you're asking these guys to do an Instagram live and talk to the entirety of the internet, it's going to be a different thing. If you're asking these guys to do a Zoom with 40 people on it, it's going to be a different thing. But when they're talking to one fan, everybody can talk to one person and they know the answer to the questions in advance, right? So like they say, what was your favorite victory, right? Or what's your favorite city to go do the rodeo in? Or what is your game day, your meal that you eat before every big competition? So these are all things they like talking about, and they're easy. So these guys, all of a sudden, the level of dynamism and enthusiasm was just unbelievable. And you do occasionally get somebody who's a little bit like low energy, but it's never to detriment, because we did one recently with a guy from was he on the Raiders? Anyway, it was an NFL player, and he was kind of like leaned back in his living room on his couch, super chill. And that was the energy of the conversations. And it gave this other level of intimacy, because then you feel like you're like, oh, we're just chilling at his house having this conversation, So it just had a different element. And that was nice in and of itself.
Yeah, and ultimately that can be in that sense, it's a feature, not a bug, because you're actually you're not getting this polished version of someone. You're getting like their real self, and sometimes the real self is someone who wants to kick back and is not that verbose at times.
Yeah.
So that's I like that. I like to be able to frame it as you're getting to see the real person, and it's not like the trained.
Yeah. Look, we used to worry about the backgrounds of the athletes. We were like, oh, we should do one of those fake, like the fake Zoom backgrounds, so in case they're in their kitchen, blah blah. What we found is like, people love when they're in their kitchen.
Totally. Like
the fans are like, oh my God, I'm talking to this guy and he has a kitchen just like I have a kitchen, It's just like, it just adds a different level to it.
What kind of opportunities, and this is just me kind of going off on all my interests now, so thanks for letting me pepper you with questions.
Sure.
What kind of opportunities are there with AI now? Like, is there a world where I can talk to Messi and it will be like live translation and he'll hear English and I'll hear he'll hear Spanish, I'll hear English, or whatever it might be. Is that opportunity really, especially these global sports like Formula One and football and all that, or soccer?
Yeah.
How do you see that coming into play in the future?
So it's really funny that you said that, because that's we have we're working on a client right now, a big telecom company, and one of the features that we're working on for them is real-time language translation. For exactly that reason, because we've done stuff before in other languages, but it's like in one language at a time. So we've worked in Portuguese and Spanish and French and a few other languages. But to be able to, as you said, to have the Rosetta Stone, as it were, so that Messi can talk to everybody in every language is kind of cool. So that's what we're building next.
Love that. Last one for you here, Dave, and this is going to be a geeky question. I'm going to put you on the spot, so be ready here. What do you make of the SaaSpocalypse narrative? Like, is there a world where someone can just go vibe code their own version of SQQ? Is that even something that's on the radar of your board? It certainly has become a talking point in the last 6 months in particular.
Yeah, I mean, like, our tech is not overly complex. The idea is, so yes, somebody could totally build another version of it, especially, a Zoom or some huge company. Fortunately for us, we have a ton of patents. But more important is our moat is just our speed and our quality, right? So like that was a thing that some of our very smart investors and advisors said in the beginning was like, get it out there fast and get it out there good. And that's what we're doing. So it's like, we're already doing the thing. So if others want to, build it and try and keep up, then, they're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool. I'm a SaaS apocalypse skeptic for the most part. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
maybe if you are a small mom and pop shop and you can't afford like to pay anything, then maybe you'll vibe code a very basic version.
Yeah.
But if you are a professional company and with working with major athletes and major brands, like you need to have your stuff under par or above board, and also you guys
Yeah.
are constantly adding features and solving for problems as well. So there's
Yeah. Well,
it's
look, we're,
a conversation stuff.
yeah, I'm also really fortunate that my college roommate is my business partner, and he happens to be a genius, and he was one of the senior data architects for Salesforce. So
Wow.
he built a lot of that stuff. So he built our thing, and he built it really well. So yeah, you can make a slipshod version of it, I'm sure, but it's not going to be as good as what my guy did.
Totally. I could geek out on this stuff all day. We're running some fun with Dave in our super quick question segment. But first episode shareable stat coming up right now. Just awesome stuff with Dave Benson, founder and CEO of Super Quick Question. We asked a lot of not super quick questions, but we will have some super quick questions coming up with Dave. You're definitely want to stick around for that because we got more great stories and insights with Dave Benson. But first, this episode's shareable stat. This episode's shareable stat comes from a recent article in Marketing Brew. It's all about theme games. I shared this on LinkedIn and it got a lot of good feedback. And this shareable stat really just blew me away. It's about MLB games and theme games in particular. So your theme game might be like Star Wars night or Princess night or Harry Potter night or some of these theme games that really take advantage of either IP or a certain community or wherever it might be. And the stat that I want to share is 56%. That is 56% of the attendees of the ticket sales for these theme games are brand new fans to the ticketing database, to fans who have not gone to a game before, or at least not that the teams are aware of. 56%. I mean, good Lord, over half of fans in a given game are new to the ballpark, are new to the game, are new to the team because they're attending for a theme game. Now, first off, just step back and appreciate what a great stat that is and how powerful a good theme game can be, especially when you think about what kind of demos are you trying to go after? Is it youth? Is it families? Is it college kids? Whatever it be, or certain fans who you might find have an over-indexed IP fandom that will cross over with your potential fans. Start to do some research that way about what other pages are they following, what other content are they consuming, what other YouTube channels are they watching, et cetera, when it comes to those who are already interacting with your content. But I think another good takeaway from this stat is yes, not just about getting all those new fans in the ballpark into your ticketing database and your marketing database, especially if you can capture that data more effectively and get them in that funnel, but also how can you take that same success rate of attendance and also amplify that, augment that, make it a reality on your digital and social channels as well. Right now, a lot of theme games will see some clever and creative content out there. We'll see people or teams or leagues or whatever. Will do some clever graphics. So, a lot of good creative production elements there. You might see some some copy in the tweets or in the Instagram captions that allude to a given IP or given to a given theme going on. But what does it look like if you take that to the nth degree? Because if you can get 56% of fans that are attending these theme games to be brand new, how can you also have that same success on your digital social channels? Does that mean, find the influencers, the micro influencers, the communities in that space and doing something more involved with them? Could you find a player or even a staff member within your team or your dance team or your mascot team or again, your professional team as well, of course, your athletes who have an interest in that theme game and get them to do something that's fun or find a way to interact on these sub communities, whether it's a subreddit or an influencer on Instagram or a YouTube channel or a talk on TikTok, wherever it might be. Getting involved in those atmospheres. Certainly, a paid social boost will help augment all these things as well. And but again, it's not just about selling a ticket. And yes, they're clearly having success with getting new fans by selling tickets and getting fans in the ballpark, but also getting fans into your digital and social ecosystem, filling that top of the funnel, finding ways to move down the funnel. Can you do a sweepstakes that for a relevant item that's related to your theme game to add more and more fans to that database and again get that exposure to your brand? Because that's what it's all about, is finding some synergy there, finding some ways to get new fans in the fold, which clearly this episode shareable stat reveals is working when it comes to getting fans in the ballpark for these theme games. So again, That episode's shareable stat. You can find the link to the full Marketing Brew article. Check out my LinkedIn or just Google theme games, Marketing Brew theme games. Alyssa Myers, who's the great author that wrote that article. And that, again, 56% of attendees, according to MLB, to these theme games were brand new fans. Just, again, an astounding stat. Think about it, ponder it, talk about it. More importantly, stick around because more good stuff coming with Dave Benson of Super Quick Question. Right back in this episode of Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Dave Benson. He is the founder and CEO of Super Quick Question. I promised that the last segment was not a bunch of Super Quick Questions, but this one is, because it's literally called Super Quick Questions. So there's no time. You can go as long or as short as you want, but are you now ready to answer some Super Quick Questions? Be on the other side of the camera for this time.
I have to tell you, we have a trademark on the term super quick question.
Oh gosh, the checks in the mail. Oh, love it. Number one, you mentioned a little about being back, starting out your career in radio and spending some time on radio. So tell me, what was the most memorable like radio segment, and also if you had the most memorable caller that you had call in or most memorable call.
I did when I was working for the BBC, I did a segment for a while called American in London, where they would send me out and about and just to experience things in an American way in London. Yeah. And I one time was at Buckingham Palace and was asked to leave. So that was a pretty memorable one. I asked a question about they gave us like kind of a private tour, and then they showed me where the Queen at the time. They had the dining room and everything was gold, like gold bowls and forks and knives and spoons. And I said something like, say I'm the Queen and I want to have a bowl of cereal in the middle of the night. Is this the bowl that I use? And they didn't like that question.
Oh, that's incredible.
So, I think there are a few other ones too they didn't like. So,
man, in the midst of all the Americans or non-Americans in America for the World Cup, like that sounds like a segment that or a feature or franchise that would crush on like YouTube or TikTok now. An American,
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I was ahead of my time.
Number two, you mentioned working at Major League Baseball as well. Tell me your favorite video segment, your favorite segment you got to work on for MLB.
We did a thing where David Ortiz came to. I worked for this project called the MLB Fan Cave, and it was a marketing project for Major League Baseball. And David Ortiz was kind enough to do a thing for us. And my idea was that we would take him out in his jersey, out and about New York, and see if he could hug Yankee fans. And so we just followed him around with the camera crew, and we just had him go. We would find people with Yankee hats on, and then he would go up and say, "Can I have a hug?" And it was awesome. It was the first viral video I had anything to do with.
That is incredible. I mean, again, speaking of stuff that would just crush on TikTok or Reels or now, like we got to find that and make it back again. That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a good one here, and maybe a really tough one. The most memorable fan and or athlete reaction, if there's one of each perhaps, from an SQQ session.
We did one with Wrexham, and with a player named Ben Tozer, who has a famously long throw-in. And this little kid joined the Super Quick Question event. He was sitting with his dad, and the kid said, quote, "I am rubbish at throw-ins." And Tozer got right into it, and he said, "Listen, this is what you do. You got to make a W with your hands on the back of the ball. You do this, and you throw it against your garage, catch it over your head, then take a step back." And he walked this kid through this drill to make him better at throw-ins. And you could see the kid just absolutely eating it up. And, I would be very shocked if that kid's throw-ins didn't dramatically improve from that.
Oh gosh, I want like a YouTube series that's like, and here's what happened later, and like we talked to this kid, and now after trying this for 6 months, look at how far his throwing. Like we need.
Right now he's on the England under-15 team now.
That's awesome. Number 4 for you. Tell me, looking back at IBM, I having been in both the B2B world and in sports world myself as well. Tell me the piece of content or campaign that you look back on most fondly from your time at IBM. It's a company that most people have heard of, probably.
Yeah, I was. So all the videos that I they were all marketing content that I made. We did one for which I was supposed to go to Tokyo for Japan Airlines, and COVID hit. And I think I told you this before. I just got back from Tokyo. I always wanted to go. I was supposed to go for work, and then COVID hit, and all the trips were canceled. So we had this whole idea to do this video, and then everything got scrapped, and we ended up doing this very high concept video around an origami airplane. So it was like stop motion animation with an origami airplane flying through Tokyo, and that was a really good one. I liked that one a lot.
That sounds super cool. Oh, that's awesome. They need to, someone needs to pick your brain about how to market AI better, like generative AI better, I guess.
Yeah,
Not an IBA thing, but just a general industry thing with generative AI just getting really lambasted by any consumer.
yeah.
Number five, tell me looking back at BR, tell me your favorite feature you produced during your time with Bleacher Report. There's probably some good ones there.
That was we did so many good ones. We did one that was we did one that was also ahead of its time where we did an animated retelling of a story with Nate Robinson, who was a famously not very tall guy who was an awesome dunker,
Yeah.
and he told the stories. And because we didn't have B-roll of the stories, we just got an animator to draw them, and so it cartoonified the stories that he was telling. He talked about the time he dunked he was on a beach basketball court and he dunked over a police officer. Like a police officer was standing there managing the crowd, and he ran and just dunked on him. And apparently, the cop thought it was hilarious. So yeah, we really liked doing that one. That was a fun one.
That's fantastic. And I'm so bullish on that too. Of like you have these great
Yeah,
stories that people are telling on like podcasts and stuff these days. Like you need a way to visualize those stories, and animation is a great way to do it, especially now that it's a
yeah,
little bit easier now in the age of Gen I to create that stuff. That's a good one.
yeah. I
Oh
agree.
yeah, Dave Robinson was one of the best dunkers of his time. You go shout out
Yeah,
to UW as well, and Knicks also,
yeah,
among others.
yeah.
Next question for you, Dave, and this is always a good one to talk to about with startup folks. Tell me the biggest lesson you've learned so far as a founder and CEO of a company.
I think being flexible and surrounding yourself with smart people. I've seen startup founders who are certain that their way is the only way, and none of their businesses are around anymore. I've been really, really fortunate to have a lot of good investors and advisors, and I am always, always, always soliciting advice from them. And it's been super helpful because, you want people who know the way, and people have different areas of expertise. So that's been really useful for me. Like we have one of our investors she's the chief marketing officer at Sesame Street. So when we have marketing questions, we go to her. And then another one of our investors is a super duper sales revenue guy for Google. So when it's sales questions, I go to him, and so on down the line. So it's like, I think thinking that you have all the answers is kind of setting you up for failure, and willingness to learn from others and know that you're not the smartest one in the room is the way that I go about it.
That's tremendous answer. I mean, it takes so much like confidence and confidence in yourself to do a startup, but then also to combine that with humility to know that like when I have a question, there's a good chance I can find someone who knows more than me about the subject area. And
Yeah.
that's a great way to think about it. Next question for you, Dave. Coming down the wire here with Dave Benson. Super quick question. This is a quick and random one. Tell me, like the sport or league, I guess the sport, which whose athletes you find to be the most outgoing or extroverted generally.
Oh man, what a good question. I should have read these questions in advance. Sport athlete as the most extroverted. I mean, it's probably the WNBA.
Hmm.
I just think they're just so smart about it, and they're so genuine and good. Um, and they're just nice to their fans. And then they also have a similar degree of humility that hockey players have. Like in my career of producing videos with athletes, the hockey players are always the best
Yeah.
because they were just like, yeah, like yes sir, no ma'am, and they're just like, they don't know they're famous, and yes, they're fun to work with.
Love that answer. And yeah, there's a reason like a lot of the theories around like women's sports and all that is because these athletes have had to build their brands and have had to
Yeah,
appreciate the fans from day one. And so that plays into how they work with fans now and with stuff like super good questions. So super
yeah.
interesting.
Well, look, you look at the smartest leagues and the ones doing the smartest things, and it is mostly the nascent ones because they've realized that fans are not something to be protected against.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just the more access and the more genuine engagement is seems to be the recipe for success there.
Hell yeah. All right, Dave, time for our food question. Let's ask our food question. Tell me if I go out if we go out to New York, what's the best meal to get and where are we going to get it?
Well, so I live in Astoria, which is in Queens, which has the largest Greek population outside of Greece. So I would say gyros at a place around the corner called Zorba's.
Very nice. I will gladly do that. At first, when you said Greek, I thought it was gonna be like a Greek diner thing because although those are starting to go away, which I'm a little sad
Yeah,
about. But
yeah,
gyro
me
sounds
too.
good to me. All right, number nine for you. Tell me the most memorable game you've ever attended.
So there are a few. I was lucky enough to be working in media to see the Yankees win a few World Series. I was at a few World Series games where they won. But most recently, I was at a baseball game with my sons. I was at a Mets game where they actually took one off the Dodgers, and that was a that. And there's the playoffs, and
Okay.
so that was when the Dodgers were an unstoppable team, and the Mets actually managed to crush them one game. And my sons and I managed to be there for it. So that was a really good one.
I'm all for that. Anytime the Dodgers lose, I'm happy man. So hell yeah. Last before you tell me your personal dream SQQ participant, someone who hasn't been on yet. That if you could, pick one athlete or one person, who would be your dream SQQ participant, who would it be?
Oh man, this is one I really should have thought about before as well. Uh, mine are sort of niche ones because it's like my one of my favorite athletes I ever got to talk to was Dan Gable, and like you and I know who Dan Gable is because
Yeah,
we're like
Iowa
wrestling
wrestler.
guys. But the obvious ones would be like a Derek Jeter or something like that, just because nobody knows anything about him. Um, yeah, it's a really tricky one, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer. It would probably be some obscure wrestler or boxer rather than a super main street athlete. Actually, I always wanted to chat with Joe Torre, and I had a couple of opportunities, and I couldn't think of anything particularly good, but I think he'd be a good one too.
There we go. I like that. All right, Dave,
No,
you
wait,
crushed
no, wait, hang on. I got to give you a better answer. I'm gonna scrap all those answers. It would be Jalen Brunson.
Jalen Brooks. Okay, that's definitely a good one now. Very popular guy in New York who basically
Yeah,
give him a key to the city for the rest of his life.
yeah.
All right, Dave, you crushed your SQQs. Now your chance to shout someone out. Just tell us it can be a podcast or a blog or a newsletter or just an Instagram follow. Just tell us who they are and why they're following.
Oh man, I don't have a good answer for that one. I'll say you. How's that?
I will gladly take that. All right, then how about you? Where can we find you as well as SQQ across the web and social?
Yeah, LinkedIn and superquickquestions.com. And then yeah, we're on Instagram. We're more active on LinkedIn and Instagram than anything else.
Look them up. Check out SQQ. Check out all the work they're doing. It's great, just inspiration. Even if you run like meet and greet, whether you're using the software or not, they just create such incredible experiences and content. And just cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today, sharing us your wisdom and expertise, and talking a little about SQQ and all the lessons you've learned from it.
Thank you, brother. Really good talking to you.
Thank you so much again to Dave Benson, founder and CEO of Super Quick Question. Definitely recommend you check it out. Just even check out their Instagram, check out their LinkedIn, and see some of the great content that comes out of these Super Quick Question initiatives. A great way to activate partners, and really again just awesome to be able to share some of these really emotional, emotive, feel good conversations, feel good content that comes out of these fan interactions, and talk about again deep engagements and creating fans for life, fans with a story to tell for life. Just cannot thank Dave for coming on the podcast today and sharing us some of his experience, insight, and wisdom, everything he's doing with SQQ. Super good question. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening, watching, downloading, however you consume this podcast. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horwitz. Find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn. Find the podcast everywhere you find podcasts, including on YouTube and TikTok as well. And of course, the podcast and more content available on dsmsports.net. Until next time, this is Neil Horwitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.